Okay, we are live. We are live just a minute or two early. So, guys and girls, welcome to today's episode. If you've already decided to drop in, if you are here, then drop something in the comments, put a thumbs up or a smiley that best reflects your mood right now so that we know you're in the room. And yeah, feel free to start saying hello and dropping any comments that you feel are relevant into the box. Okay. We're only just live, and I guess anyone who's going to join in now is going to start watching it from the start anyway. So this week's episode is going to be about nutrition, focusing on diet, specifically during the situation as it is now, the lockdown restrictions that many people are facing, and the special guest, nutrition expert, Lorne Empson, is here joining me to offer his extensive knowledge on that area. So, Lorne, would you like to introduce yourself and let everyone know who you are and why you are here?
Of course, mate. Yeah. So my name's Lorne. I studied for my degree in nutrition back in 2007. At which point I was trying to also make it as a triathlete. So I was very into getting the most out of my body from a nutrition perspective at the time as well. So it went nicely hand in hand. Upon graduating, I joined the Royal Marines, spent a bit of time there. And then since leaving, I've set up my own nutrition consultancy. And I'm very fortunate I get to work with people all around the world from all different backgrounds. But they tend to be people that train quite consistently and just are struggling to see the results they want. So that tends to be the kind of people that I work with, and that's kind of my work in a nutshell, really.
Awesome, good stuff. So clearly, then you're going to have a wealth of experience from various different angles and perspectives based on that quite widely ranging experience that you just laid out there. So I think it's going to be worth taking lots of notes on lots of knowledge bombs throughout the course of this. So really the main angle of this sort of mini series that I've been running has been geared very much towards the current situation, people stuck at home, people out of work, not necessarily out of work, but out of the workplace, and all of the different factors that are coming into play at the moment that might be interrupting people's fitness journey, bringing in new obstacles to reaching their fitness goals. So I think maybe a good place to start would be talking about some of the common challenges that people might be facing now and the ways in which you're helping people to get around those.
Yeah, I think the biggest two for me in my practice at the moment are a lack of routine or a disruption to a normal routine, and then boredom. Those are the two real main players at the moment. There's many more, but those are the two that are quite ubiquitous among my clients currently. So we start with the first one, and that's that disruption of a routine. So many people wake up in the morning, they have a morning routine, they get ready for work, they leave the house, they arrive at work, they have meetings, they have phone calls, emails, they're busy, they're in a different environment, and food isn't so much of a factor necessarily. Obviously, people come from all different backgrounds, but the point I'm making is there tends to be other things on your mind when you're in a workplace other than food. And then you obviously have your commute home. People will then go to the gym, and then they will eventually get home, and then they'll have their evening routine and go to bed. Now, a massive chunk of that has been removed at the moment with this lockdown. So with that comes issues. One is our normal eating times that were dictated by work, i.e. break times, lunch times, etc., are now not there. So we have to establish new ones. People tend to go to bed that little bit later because they wake up that little bit later. So that has a knock-on effect. So that lack of routine is the first thing that needs to be addressed. And there's no right or wrong answer. There's no set format, but it's got to be something that works for you as an individual and something that can be repeated. So that's the first challenge is re-establishing that routine when there isn't one.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really glad you said that. Actually, in the first episode that I did on this series, I just did a bit of an overview of what I call the 3 pillars of health, being movement, diet, and then mindset. And establishing some sort of new routine to either try and reflect what you had before, or to just, put some structure into place where that structure is now gone, is one of the things that I addressed in that episode. I think it's not only useful for keeping on track with things like your fitness and your diet, but I also see it as quite a big influencer of just anxiety, given the current situation. I think having that structure in place plays a huge role in just mitigating stress. And we all know that, one challenge that people often face with diet is the emotional connection of comfort eating as well. So would you say that potentially the stress factor plays a little bit of a role in that need to establish a routine as well?
Without a doubt. So we have to remember we have like two hunger pathways in the brain. We have homeostatic hunger, which is legitimate hunger, the need for food. And then we have hedonistic hunger. And this is driven by sights, sounds, taste, the sensations of food, routine. The whole experience of food can be very hedonistically driven. So if you are lacking in a routine and you are sat at home and you decide you're hungry or you feel hunger, it's quite hard to differentiate between homeostatic, so legitimate hunger, and hedonistic hunger. So added to that, eating is a very legitimate distraction. If you are sending emails, you're getting a bit bored, you can legitimize to yourself, I'm just going to go to the kitchen and make something to eat because I'm hungry. So this is where the lack of routine and that boredom, or that want for a distraction or reduction in stress, reductions in anxiety, can be a real double-edged sword. It can be a real problem, because not only have you not got the distractions, you've also got an increased temptation or want or need to go and eat. So, and you've also got a kitchen sat there waiting for you, which when you're in your workplace you don't often have. So it really is a concoction of issues that, it's not the end of the world. It can be broken down. It can be sorted, and you can get through it. But it certainly does pose a different problem that people normally would face if they've got a normal routine and they go out to work in the day.
Yeah, absolutely. And talking about that availability, I mean, that is really pretty much the reason that we're talking about any of this in the first place, isn't it? Because ancestrally, we never even would have had the requirement to track. We would have been relying on those two kind of inherent systems of food moderation, which are appetite and simply availability. And obviously in today's age, we've got availability to food all of the time, and availability to obviously, all these hyperpalatable foods and things. So I guess then this would be a good time for people to be a bit more vigilant on managing that aspect specifically. For example, avoiding having things in the house that are going to take you off track. Would you have any sort of tips with regards to that specifically?
I think the first point I want to make is that we need to, everybody's an adult and they can do whatever they want. If they do want to get up and go and eat food and it's a distraction, it makes them feel better and they're okay with that, that's cool. Like, this isn't, the industry never should be forcing opinions and thought processes on people. If that's the way they want to get through this lockdown, crack on. Equally, if people are very conscious of gaining weight that they don't want to, it's not something they want to do, then there are steps you can put in place. Little things I've been doing with my clients, super simple but effective, is treating the working day as if you were going out to work. So the night before, still prep your food, still prep your snacks, have them in a bag in the fridge, and then when you are hungry, you go to that prep food as if you were at work. Other things are establishing that routine so that you are eating around events rather than just grazing throughout the day. There's many ways in which you just need to assess what it is you're doing and try. If you were successful prior to this and you were looking and feeling how you wanted to, then we need to try and emulate that in the current situation. And the way we do that is just by sitting down, assessing what's actually happening, where you feel you are potentially drifting away from what you want to achieve, and then just putting things in place to stop that happening. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. And I think as well, there's, I don't know, in my opinion, there's something to be said for the familiarity as well of trying to replicate the routine that you had and like you're talking about, acting as if you're going out for the working day, putting together the sort of foods that you would normally have done anyway, planning for the meal times that you would normally have had. I think there's a lot to be said for that familiarity, and just kind of making the whole process of that a little bit easier to stay on track. So, what are some positives about the current situation that you think kind of lend themselves to people who are either just starting to attempt to manage their diet better now, or were having difficulties before? Like, what are some kind of factors that you think might actually lend themselves to those processes?
So there's loads. There really is a lot. There's a lot of negatives, don't get me wrong, but there are also some massive positives. First one, we don't have the distractions and the issues of going out, drinking, eating out in restaurants, and socializing in general. They are massive factors that can be hard to accommodate when we're first starting out. We don't know what we're doing around nutrition, don't know how to compensate and balance. So the first one for me is that's simply not there. So you can make massive inroads into your goals whilst those distractions aren't there. Secondly, you can get in the kitchen. We've got time to cook. We've got time to try new recipes. We've got time to expand our repertoires. I'm a big advocate of when we're first making things, weigh it, understand what's in it, know what 100 grams of chicken looks like, know what 50 grams of rice looks like, so that we don't need to use weighing scales going forward, so that we understand what's in our foods. And then when we do then go out to eat in restaurants, we've got an idea. We can look at things, we can assess, and we can have a deeper understanding of what's in the foods we're consuming. But that starts off by getting interactive with our food in the kitchen in the first place. And we've got the time to do that now. We've got plenty of time to exercise and train. As challenging as that can be, if lack of kit, etc. If you are motivated and you want to do it, there are ways around it. There is ample things online. There are ample people who are there to help you, just like yourself, to give you home workouts and to keep you on track. So there's three there for me, massive positives that it's really important that people don't lose sight of those in these times.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I'm taking loads of notes. I hope everyone else is, is writing stuff down as well. But that's really interesting. We said time to get interactive with food. I couldn't agree more. Lots of people I know that are dieting out there sort of live hoping for this reality to eventually come to fruition. That is, you can just eat what you want and kind of do that intuitively. And obviously there's other tool sets out there as well, like applying like a time restricted feeding window, some sort of intermittent fasting routine, just mindful eating, these kinds of things. But I feel like they very much come after that initial period of getting to know your diet, like you say, getting interactive with your food, understanding what's in your food, the macronutrients, the micronutrients, where the most calories in your diet are coming from. And then understanding when you're out then without having to track or without, having to think about it, all of those factors, where the calories are coming from, what's giving you the protein, what's giving you the fats and all of that good stuff. But certainly, getting interactive with your food and understanding your diet right from the word go lays the foundation.
Absolutely. I just want to say an analogy there that I find quite apt is, imagine every time you went to the supermarket, you never looked at the price of anything and you just put what you wanted in the shopping basket or the trolley or whatever, and you got to the till, you'd have no idea really what it was going to say because you'd not looked at the price of anything. Whereas a really good place to get to nutritionally is to understand, well, the equal to that is if you're just eating food all day, you don't know what's in it, you don't know what you're going to get at the end. Now, the place we want to get to is most of us now could walk around a supermarket and we pick up familiar foods. We roughly know what price it is. We roughly know what price a loaf of bread is. How much milk costs. We don't know exactly, but we roughly know. And then when we get to the end of the till, we roughly know what's going to be. And that's the place we want to get to in nutrition, that empowered state where we're not tracking everything to the gram, where we're not worried about eating things. We roughly know what's in the food we're eating, and we're able to maintain our weight year round after initial fat loss phase, etc. And it's super important that always is the end goal. We don't want people, or I certainly don't want my clients, fearful of food, not able to have food, that I can't have that if I can't track it, I can't eat there because I don't know what's in it. That's not health to me. That isn't that holistic view of health, in my opinion. We want people empowered, have an awareness, have knowledge, they know what's in their foods, and they can feel comfortable eating and compensating and balancing throughout the week. But that only comes from that initial investment of looking at the prices in the supermarkets and building awareness and knowledge. It's not a massively long process. It takes longer for some, but it's such a worthwhile thing to do, because in the long term, you have that understanding of what you're consuming, and you can balance on your own terms without having to track and log. And that's the end goal for me and my clients when I'm working with them.
Yeah, awesome. Really good stuff. So just on that as well, you're talking a little bit about sort of time frames. It's not being that much of a long process to get to grips with that initial understanding of diet. And I very much feel like the patience factor is quite a prevalent obstacle for people. Quite often they'll talk about how they've tried lots of things, tried lots of diets, tried lots of different methods. And quite often when I dig a little bit deeper with people and ask them sort of the details of those practices, it turns out that they haven't really tried anything or stuck to anything for very long. I think that's partially because of sometimes a lack of belief and a lack of faith in what they're doing, and that, you know, if that faith and that belief isn't there, they're unprepared to give it that amount of time. But I think also, you know, there's a point at which you just have to stick with something for a certain amount of time in order to just see what the benefits are, and kind of just getting used to becoming more efficient at it as well. But anyway, what I was going to ask was, what's kind of a typical amount of time that you have your clients tracking their food for before they're able to potentially look at using other tool sets that aren't so kind of in depth as that, like maybe intuitive eating and stuff like that?
There's no, I couldn't tell you.
Right.
Some people do it for a day and go, I've got no interest in that, and we work around other things. Other people do it for a month and go, you know, I quite enjoy this, but I don't need to use this now. It's how long is a piece of string. I've had great success with people who have never tracked at all, but have still looked at the backs of packets of food and still built an awareness and an understanding of what's in foods. But there is no, for me as a practitioner, no rule for that. I don't say, right, we must do this for the following amount of time, because everyone's an individual. And going back to what you just said there, it does come down to consistency. It does come down to understanding that it takes time. We live very much in an on-demand society. Everything we have is at our fingertips, and we want results. We are swayed, whether we like it or not, by social media, by false claims, by people saying, I achieved this in 2 weeks, and people want it instantly. And long-term sustainable behavior change does not happen overnight. It takes time. We have to work at it. It has to be enjoyable. It has to be sustainable in a sense that you have to be able to enjoy the food you're eating, unless you're a really weird bodybuilder, or weird in general. You should be eating foods that you enjoy. And again, that comes back to my point. That is health for me. Having food, no guilt, not demonizing any foods. So it does take time. But in answer to your question, every single person is different, because everybody is an individual. And that's why I work with people on an individual basis. We do have mass market diet schemes, the likes of Slimming World, Weight Watchers, etc. And for some people they work, some people they don't. You know, that's a podcast for another day. But for me, it has to be done on an individual basis. What works for an individual around their life, their kids, their job, their sleep, their training, all those factors taken into account. There's no one size fits all approach, in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, as you alluded to there, you know, people's expectations become very warped as a result of the quick fix hype there is in the fitness industry. Like you just mentioned, yeah, everybody's getting sold this idea that they can have 30-day transformations, and you know, like if they just follow this juice diet for 7 days, they'll drop a stone or whatever, and then they do end up with these really unrealistic expectations of what they can achieve in a fairly short space of time. I hear an expression coined quite often that people overestimate what they can achieve in a month, but massively underestimate what they can achieve in a year. I think that definitely stands true within diet and fitness.
Yeah, just adding to that, mate, as well.
Yeah.
People have to understand their journey, and they're on their own journey. They're the only them. No one else matters, and constantly compare. You know, comparison is a thief of joy. I really like that quote. In as much as you can always compare yourself to someone who works in the same workplace as you, to a family member, to a partner, and you can't do that because you're the only you with your barriers, your genetics, your sleeping patterns, your aversions to particular foods, your training volumes, intensities. So it's important that you are on your own journey. You have something that works for you as an individual, and you have patience and consistency, and that will get you to where you want to go.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's key for people to remember as well that, you know, probably everybody who's watching this now is at least a couple of decades into life. And if you're just starting to manage diet better for the first time, if you're just starting to get into regular exercise for the first time, you know, it's taken you at least a couple of decades for you to get to this point now. So be prepared to make at least a reasonably short commitment in comparison to the amount of time you've been alive, to be able to start trying to recuperate some of the some of the misdemeanors that have gone on up until this point.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because there's a lot of dichotomous thinking. There's a lot of good and bad, and I'm on the wagon, off the wagon, and it's really interesting because I deal with people obviously who train consistently, and they have a very different mindset around their training. They know that they're not going to smash every training session. They know they're going to have sessions that aren't too great, weeks, months that aren't all that great, but they stick with it and they have consistency because I think they know, or it has been proven to them over time, that it's worked for them. And I think the problem when it comes to nutrition is if we don't get some people don't get instant results, they lose faith. Whereas you don't get instant results from many things. We have to work. If you're going to learn an instrument, you wouldn't just be great in 30 days. You know, we have to give time for skills to accumulate, and being competent with your nutrition is a skill. Understanding what's in food is a skill. Understanding that you can go out and eat and drink and have great times, but compensate elsewhere in the week is a skill, and you have to take or allow time for the acquisition of those skills. And I think that's where the industry fails people at the moment, or has failed people, is this snappy, on-demand, rapid weight loss or whatever you want to achieve. And it's just not the case. It's false. And it's about taking that training mentality of consistency, of turning up each time and doing what you can, even if you're not feeling great, and applying that to your nutrition. A lot of people already have the right mentality. They're just not shining it in other areas of their life.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's really interesting. Yeah, I think as well, when people get that mindset of being consistent over time is what really makes the difference, then that also helps to mitigate hanging successes off of every week, as you kind of allude to there. You know, being consistent over time doesn't require you to have the perfect session every second session. It doesn't require you to have the perfect week every week. It just requires you to show improvement over time. And so people get very demoralized when they have a bad day or a bad week. And the reality of it is that over time, that doesn't matter. So that's a really great point. I'm really happy that you said that. What would you say, I'm interested to hear your take on what you think of are the influencing factors of the ability to diet and stay in shape as a result of practicing it as a skill over time. And maybe it's not clear what I mean by that question, but I'm trying to explain to people quite often that for me, when I jump back into a period of tracking in order to maybe drop a bit of body fat over a short period, maybe 8 weeks or so, for me, it's super easy to jump straight back into that process because I've done it so many times. I understand all of the nuances that go hand in hand with that, like how I'm going to use software to help me. For example, I can get straight back into MyFitnessPal. I can log back into that. I know how to use the app. I can even look at old versions of my diet. I know which foods in particular help me specifically to stay on track and which ones to avoid, and all of these different things that have been well rehearsed over having done it lots of times before. So what would you say on on the kind of influence of practice in being an assisting factor with diet?
What, for someone who's starting out or someone who's had success before?
Well, I just mean, would you agree that it's always going to be harder when you first start, but doing it consistently over time is going to make that whole process much easier? And I don't know what you feel, kind of, if that's something you talk about with your clients at all, or if it's something that you...
Yeah, so we're looking to get them to that level of competence where they can. So ultimately, if somebody comes to me to lose body fat, we want to do that as effectively as we can whilst they're still enjoying their lives, and then maintain. So ultimately, we don't want them to regain any body fat unnecessarily that they don't want to regain. So we're looking to be competent at maintenance, which is where calories in and match the calories out. So that's where I want my clients to stay year round. If life events dictate and they do gain some body fat, then they need to drop back down into that deficit. It's about doing everything that allowed them to be successful first time round. So yeah, maybe an initial period of tracking just to recalibrate. We do get those distorted portions over time where, 50 grams of oats becomes 60, becomes 75 quite easily, which is cool. We're all humans, that happens. So just sharpen up on those little things, making sure that those higher days are within the realms of what they had the first time round, and just a recalibration full stop is something that I would recommend if that gain did occur, and that was somebody's goal to lose it. But yeah, it's about doing the basics, about doing them consistently. So yeah, I'd agree with that.
Cool, good stuff. So some people who will be watching this will have been on a fitness journey for some time. We've been trying to take steps to manage diet better, and some people will obviously be probably just thinking about trying it for the first time and wanting a bit of information on sort of how they could begin. So for you, what do you see as being like kind of key first steps that people can take towards tidying up their dietary practice and sort of getting on the road to success to start with?
So the first step is deciding what you want to achieve, and then the time span in which you want to achieve it. If you don't have either of those, then you're not really off to a great start. So understand what you want to achieve and the time span you want to achieve it, and then work back from there. How aggressive do you want to, let's just use fat as an example. How aggressive do you want to go? How social are you? How prepared are you to be aggressive with it? If it's not very aggressive, that's cool. Then your time span is going to be that little bit longer. There's nothing wrong with that. It's a journey. It's your journey, and no one else matters. If you are quite up to being quite aggressive, that's part of your personality, it's what you like, then your time span or your time frame will be slightly smaller. From there, we need to start working on the basics. How much protein are you consuming? Have you got any idea around that? What kind of training you're doing? Are you fueling your training adequately? What's your sleep like? What's your hydration like? In terms of that total calorie intake, is that in line with where you want to go? Are you at maintenance, surplus, deficit? So it's just about implementing the basics from the get-go, really. But it all starts with what you want to achieve and what time frame you want to achieve it.
Yeah, awesome, good stuff. I mean, that's definitely the first step that I always ask everybody to do when they get involved with me, is to just have a clear vision. If they don't already know exactly where they want to end up, what that looks like, how that feels like, the rough time frames that they want to be able to achieve that in, then that's the first thing that we really need to get absolute clarity on, so we can then obviously build the roadmap between where they are now and where that is, and manage all the obstacles that are in between here and there. So we do, but just to add to that, we can't take a finite mindset into behavior change. So you can never win nutrition. You don't stand on a podium after 12 weeks and go, I won, it's over now. It's not a finite game. Like a game of football, there's a time limit and there's a set of rules, and you can win or lose a game. You can't win nutrition. So we never want to take a finite mindset into it. It's an infinite game. We want to be the best we can for the rest of our lives. And removing that time pressure, although I said what you want to achieve in the time frame, that the underlying rule to that is that it's an infinite game. Once you might want to lose some body fat by a certain time period, but you then don't just pull everything out the window you've been working on. Those things then become the mainstays, and they keep you there because it's an infinite game. You want to be as happy and as healthy as you can around food until the day you die.
So try and move away, for those that are listening, from that, right, I've got 10 weeks, I'm just going to nail this. Once it's over, because it's never over. The habits that you establish are going to stay with you for the rest of your life. And understand that roadblocks will come. Life is life. It gets in the way. And having that infinite mindset will allow you to overcome those barriers far more easily than thinking, oh, well, I'm off track now. I gave myself a time frame of 10 weeks. That was immovable. It was never going to change. And now now I've ruined it. If you play a long game, then it might take a little bit longer, but that's cool.
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it, mate. And I couldn't agree with you more. And it goes back a little bit to what we were saying earlier about, once you understand that it's a journey that happens better with consistency over time rather than hanging off of, successes every single week, then you allow yourself a bit of a margin for those obstacles that life throws at you that you can't plan for, that just come up out of nowhere, without stressing about that, without, like you say, that time pressure of feeling like, this can't happen this week because I need to be, 3 kilograms lighter by whatever. And then that stress of that time pressure can only kind of hinder those results in the long term, or certainly it will hinder your mindset. And as we know,
it's a massive hindrance. It's something I do with my clients on a regular basis, is just elongating that time frame. Yes, we want to be at point A, and that could be a certain level of body fat. That's cool. But ultimately, for the rest of your life, you want to be happy and healthy. So that, for me, takes precedent, and playing that infinite game, and understanding that, if you have mapped out, I'm actually 4 kilos lighter in 4 weeks, and you get injured or there's an issue with your family or whatever, and that knocks you off. If you're playing that finite game, it's lost. It doesn't happen. But if you're playing that infinite game, it's like, okay, I'll just recalibrate, reset, and carry on the journey. And that's the difference a lot of the time between success and failure.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. That's interesting. Really interesting points. So that kind of ties in a little bit with sort of goal setting, which is something that I talk about a lot with people in general and clients. So do you have kind of a set method for the way in which you like to outline goals for people?
Yeah, we have overriding goals where they want to be. Obviously, like I said, you need to decide what you want to achieve and over a rough time frame. And then we break that down into like 4 week, where we want to be mentally and physically. For me, the mental goals are way more important. Like, I want my clients to be competent around their nutrition, confident, empowered to make the right decisions and enjoy their lives. Nutrition becomes a part of their life, not their sole driver in life. But we have to, like I've said, we have to remain flexible. We are not robots. We will have shit days, shit weeks, because that's life. But understanding it's part of a bigger, longer game makes that a lot easier to take.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So when I sit down and talk through goals with the people that I work with, I quite often try to come up with various different avenues of what I call like potential success. So I find that when people are trying to diet for themselves, quite often they'll only give themselves one metric that they're measuring their success by, and that will usually be the weight on the scales, as a classic example. And I feel like that's one of the problems that they often face, because first of all, it's quite a boring goal to work towards anyway. It's not that much that's very exciting about just looking at the numbers on a set of scales. And also, on any week that those numbers don't come up as the ones that you're hoping for, you've now only given yourself one opportunity to have a success that week, when in reality, there were probably loads of other positives about your week. You might have developed a better relationship with food in general. You might have developed an understanding of your diet. You might have taken positive steps to make better choices when you were out at social outings with someone or in the supermarket doing your shopping. And all these positives kind of get thrown to the side and discarded just because the numbers on the scales, don't meet what they were hoping for. So I make quite a big deal out of trying to set various different goals, talking about mindset goals, thinking about what are the goals specifically for how you want to feel and not just what you want to weigh and how you want to look. If confidence is something that you're hoping is going to be a byproduct of losing that weight, let's talk about how we might be able to measure that. And that might be the positive that you get in a week that you didn't lose the weight you wanted to, or whatever. Is that something that you do? I mean, it sounds like it marries up with what you were just talking about.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of the scales. It's one metric. It's very fallible. They can be affected by so many factors. They can hold a huge amount of power over people. So one of the first questions we ask when talking about recording success and measuring success is, if you wanted to see a number on the scales and it didn't say that number, how would that make you feel? And if they react adversely, then we just don't use it as a metric, because what's the point? I love using clothes, so a pair of shorts, pair of jeans, a top, a dress, a skirt, whatever, as a mark of success. If they can get into those jeans that they couldn't before, that is a tangible sign of success that cannot be taken away. And then that also marries up with confidence as well, because they're wearing a pair of jeans that are tight fitting and they feel great. So absolutely, it's about finding your individual wins and what success means to you, and moving away from this something like the scales, which is very, like I said, open to factors that aren't even in your control. You may have unbeknown had higher sodium content in your diet for a couple of days. You get on the scales and you're like, what? Whereas you were on point, you felt great, you were socializing, you were compensating really well throughout the week, and you had loads of wins. And like you said, they get chucked out the window because the scale doesn't represent what you see as success. And we need to be very wary of that, very, very wary of that, because it will massively undermine your efforts to be successful on that journey.
Awesome. Yeah, good stuff. Definitely. I couldn't agree with you more. And I think, for me, the scales just kind of take the excitement out of it as well. You know, it's not an exciting goal. And if you're not enthusiastic about the end goal, then it's much less likely that you're going to stay on track anyway. You know, there's got to be something about what you want at the end gets you excited, I think. You know, that motivation, you can't rely on motivation from YouTube videos or pictures of you on the fridge or whatever. You know, it's got to be something inherently highly desirable about that end goal that just keeps you driven and keeps you focused on it. And that, like the clothes, fitting into a piece of clothing, like you said, for me, that's a classic way of just kind of hyping up that goal. You know, it's much more interesting, the thought of being able to fit into a piece of clothing that you've wanted to wear for ages, that you're just too big to get into. And then, you know, like I say, the thought of being able to do that is a bit more interesting than just looking at a number on a set of scales at the end of the week.
But equally on that, if on the way to that journey of fitting into those shorts, I can tell that my client's relationship with food has improved, their confidence is improved, they are at a place where they're quite happy, they can socialize, they can go for a coffee and have a bit of cake with their friends and not feel guilty. And yet, if we push on that little bit further, where those things are disrupted, where they then, I can't go for that coffee now, though, if we drop down a little bit lower, and you know what, my energy just really dropped through the floor, I'm not performing well in my sessions, then we recalibrate and we say, well, does it, we initially wanted to fit into those jeans, but how do you feel now? And that, well, I feel great. And well, then that's brilliant. We're at where you want to be. So always be open to changing the goalposts, because what matters is your overall health, and fitting into a pair of jeans might feel great in that one aspect of your life, but you have to sacrifice eating with your family, socializing with your friends, sacrifice training performance and your overall health. Does that one goal of fitting into those jeans really warrant that? And a lot of the time the answer is no. So always be prepared to move your goals with where you're at.
Yeah, definitely. That's a really good point. Really, really interesting point. So we had a bit of a question on the community page earlier that kind of ties in with something I wanted to ask you about. Key influences for making sure, or not making sure, but for helping people to stay on track over time. And obviously, as we talked about, you know, this is an infinite quest. It's not something that ends. You don't get to the end and win and stand on the podium, as you said. You know, something that needs to be sustainable over time. One of the questions that we had on the community page earlier, and I'm pretty sure the guy is watching, this is from Andy O'Neill. If you were watching, Andy, feel free to put a comment in the box. And then if you've got any comments to expand on the answer to this, or to expand on your question so that we can answer it better, then feel free to drop those in there. But Andy popped on the group earlier and was asking about tips and tricks for managing caloric intake over time. and said that he's successfully manipulated his diet in the past for various goals, weight loss goals, and that his brother has had success with the MyFitnessPal app, which is a calorie tracking app, and he's just basically asking for advice on how to manage that caloric intake. The obstacle that he's facing, it sounds like, is that he's working away from time to time, and that he's not always in control of his food. Sounds like it's being fed while he's away, presumably for work. So, what sort of advice would you have specifically for someone in Andy's circumstance, and just in general for managing caloric intake, make it sustainable over time, and facing those particular obstacles, such as working away and not being in control of your own diet?
Yeah, so it comes back to what I was saying before, that there has to be that initial investment and interaction with the food you're consuming, understanding and having awareness of portion sizes and your total caloric intake. And then when you do work away, for example, and you're not in control, which a lot of us aren't, and it's a false, it's a bit of a falsehood to think you're always going to be in control of the food you're consuming, nor should you need to be or want to be, because you can still make good decisions based on what you're presented with. So if V is working away and he's not particularly in control of everything he's consuming, that's good. That's a point for him to prove how competent he is around food. And he's looking to replicate the things that he's worked on in his own time. So if he was looking to maintain his weight by that initial investment and understanding what's in his foods, he will then build up an awareness of what he can consume when he's working away, in terms of meal times, portion sizes, and frequency. So don't overthink it. Spend that initial time, understand roughly what's in the food you're consuming, and then replicate that when you're away to the best that you can. And if you do struggle with that, that's okay. Be kind to yourself. And then when you do have more control at weekends, for example, you can drop down a little bit lower to compensate. So there's ways through those issues.
Yeah, awesome, mate. Good stuff. And so in terms of making it sustainable over time, because we talked a little bit about tracking as being something that people quite often, or that can be really useful for people to do initially. But I know in my experience as well, I'm sure you've got much more experience of this, that people will quite often fall out of love with tracking, either quite quickly or at least sort of eventually over time, if it's something that they try to keep up with, beyond that initial period of just understanding food. In order to sort of keep structure, they quite often fall out of it eventually. And then we have to look at sort of different tool sets to try and keep that momentum going. Another sort of technique that I wanted to ask you a little bit about as well is that I find quite interesting is the concept of diet breaks, whereby people will insert specific periods of time, maybe a week following a 4-week period of dieting, where they don't actually diet at all, or they're just mindful about what they're eating, but they're not actually tracking, or whatever it might be. So what's your opinion on tool sets like diet breaks, and what other kind of tips and tricks do you use specifically to keep people going after quite prolonged periods of dieting?
Well, one, they're a very good idea, both psychologically and physiologically. We have to understand that the body will react to a deficit, and we do get adaptations within the body where it senses that lack of calories over a period of time, and we like I said, things do get turned down slightly. And also psychologically, it's very difficult to maintain a deficit for long periods of time, and you shouldn't need to be or want to be in a deficit all the time. So first and foremost, they're very good to do. In terms of when and how often, again, it comes down to you as an individual. When do you want them? You know, have you got a stag do coming up? Would we want to insert one around that time period? Hen do? Is there a holiday? Is there natural breaks in your life that we can tie it in with? Cool. How was your head? How are you feeling? Are you just getting a bit bogged down by all of this? But then let's just stick in a week at maintenance. I think what's key to differentiate is we're not looking to just completely take our foot off the gas and just go crazy for a week, because you're very likely start to undo some of the work that you started in that initial fat loss phase. So a week at maintenance, so you're going to be in that deficit. Where's my camera? So you're going to be in a deficit, and then we're going to spend a week at maintenance. We're not going to be in a deficit and then go crazy high, because then what was the point of having that initial phase in deficit? But all we're looking to do is give you a psychological break, and then we're looking to counteract those effects of that adaptive thermogenesis, where the body starts, like I said, to turn some of those key mechanisms down. And they're a fantastic idea, and I use them all the time with clients. And it just comes down to where they are as individuals, how they are doing, and trying where we can to link it in with key events in their life.
Yeah, again, and taking that long-term approach, gives you the option to do that, gives you the option to throw in those weeks where you don't need to worry about it, or not, you don't need to worry about it, but you're just taking a bit of a break from whatever protocol you've been following up until that point, rather than trying to get it all done within, a 4-week period or an 8-week period or whatever sort of quick fix solution it is that you're trying to focus on.
Yeah. And it's vital. It really is vital. And giving people that permission and empowerment to be like, oh, well, I can just have a week at maintenance and eat more calories. Like, yeah, that's fine. We're hitting the pause button. We're not losing body fat necessarily, but we're certainly not gaining it. So it's okay. Just relax. And it gives people that freedom, like you said, to then incorporate those life events instead of turning up to a stag do thinking, shit, how am I going to stay in a deficit? Oh, this is going to be a nightmare. And 9 times out of 10, you won't, and you'll go completely excessive. Whereas you turn up with more calories in the bag, you've got the mindset, you know what you're doing, and it's a much more empowered position to be in, rather than I've got 8 weeks, I must lose the full amount of body fat within that 8 weeks, otherwise I'm failure. It's the wrong way to approach it.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I'm a big fan of also asking people to make sure they remember to reflect back to the successes that they've already had. So what I mean is, people are always looking forwards. We're always looking at the next week. Okay, great, I've done that. Now next week I want to lose some more. Next week I want this to happen. The week after that, I want to be here. And it's very difficult to forget that over the period of the last, however many weeks, however many months, you probably achieved so much already. So for example, if you've lost 20 kilos, over, 6 months, and then you take a month diet break, you've still lost 20 kilos in 7 months. Even if you didn't lose anything in the last month, it's still a huge achievement within that fairly relatively short period of time. So reflection for me is quite a crucial factor as well.
Yes, great point. And I think this is where things like photos are so useful. We see ourselves each day. We don't really notice changes, significantly as other people do. Quite often clients haven't seen someone for 2 months. They see them, they can't believe how different they look. And my clients say, oh, I didn't really notice. So things like pictures from that give you that reference point from the start to towards the end is, again, just gives you that reflection and shows you how far you've come.
Yeah. Absolutely. So guys who are listening, if you've got any questions or anything throughout the period of this talk, just feel free to fire them into the comments box at any point, and then we'll try to either address those at the time or certainly put together some sort of answers for you towards the end when we start to wrap up, which is probably going to be fairly shortly. So if you've got any comments, bang those in there now. Any questions? So one thing I did want to come back to and ask you to expand on a little bit, Lorne, was the be kind to yourself factor. This is another one that I put quite a lot of time into working on with people, which is just kind of moving away from this idea that, exercise or dieting is some sort of kind of punishment to redeem yourself for your former sins and all of this kind of stuff that's quite damaging towards your your mindset and your relationship about food and exercise. And it also comes back to what you're talking about with natural breaks, using diet breaks within natural breaks that are likely to come up anyway, such as going away for, a holiday or something like that. It's important that I think people can go away for those periods and be quite happy that, it isn't the end of the world. And also just that long-term mindset. What's your advice to your clients about kind of being nicer to themselves about it? How do you look at developing a more positive relationship with clients and their food and that kind of stuff? Have you got any particular sort of strategies that you put in place for that, or things that you talk about?
Well, the first thing is that every client I ever work with has unconditional permission to eat what they want when they want. If they just want to eat chocolate for a week, cool, you're an adult. You do whatever you want. And we need to move away from this dichotomous thinking of, like I said, good and bad. Ultimately, is eating chocolate for a week going to be beneficial to your overall health? Arguably, no. Obviously, we're going to lack however many nutrients, and it's not going to be great. You're not going to feel great, and you're not going to perform well. So obviously that's an extreme example. But the point being is you do have the permission to do that should you wish to. So you're not railroaded into any way of thinking or any way of eating. What we're looking to do ultimately is find a balance. And that balance for me it tends to be around about 80-20, the famous 80-20 rule. And what I mean by that is 80% of the calories that we spend are on protein dense, nutritious foods that make us feel good. They're fantastic to allow us to perform well, recover well. They're good for our hair, our skin, our nails. And it's just a good way to spend the majority of our calories. 20% though, I still very much encourage my clients to eat cakes, crisps, chocolate, drink alcohol, enjoy foods they like. Some weeks that balance will be 60-40. Some weeks will be 90-10, but roughly we're looking for that 80-20 so that they have that permission, they have that empowerment and that confidence to eat foods they enjoy, knowing that it's built on a solid, stable foundation of protein-dense, nutritious foods. And that's being kind to yourself. That is sitting with your husband on the sofa and having a glass of wine. That is going out to the park with your kids and having an ice cream and letting them see you be confident around food. Tracking everything to the gram, not eating this, not eating that because I'm not allowed and I can't have this, is not being kind to yourself, and it is not healthy in my opinion. We want that lovely balance of a protein-dense, nutritious, rich diet, but a diet that also contains stuff you enjoy. And that is ultimately where I'm looking to get all my clients to.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that some people get success from just eliminating every food from their diet that they view as a restricted food or a bad food, which is a term that I really hate, because I'm a much bigger fan of the concept that no food is inherently bad, and that food can only be bad in the presence of poor dietary behavior. But some people do get massive success from losing weight by just eliminating those foods and finding substitutes for those foods. Me personally, I feel like that's only a partial step to the freedom that people actually want, which is what you're describing now, which is being able to make all the decisions that they want to make, but just managed better and managed in proportion in a way that still remains conducive with their goals. So that
takes time. That takes time, and that's what the point I want to get across is: don't expect that mindset, that behavior, that knowledge, that awareness to happen in 4 weeks, because the likelihood of it happening is very, very small. You have to invest in yourself for the long term, play that infinite game, and you will get to a point where you're competent around nutrition, where you can have food you enjoy, but it's built on a solid foundation of protein dense, nutritious foods. We also have to understand the research, and we know that if we have predominantly processed foods, we know that the likelihood is they're not going to satiate as much. We know that we will likely eat more on those days, and it's about understanding those core concepts. And again, that knowledge acquisition only comes with regular, repeated, either a coaching process or however you want to go through it, but it doesn't come in one sitting. We have to constantly absorb that knowledge, implement it, understand it. And like I said, that isn't going to happen over 4 weeks, and we have to be patient and consistent.
Yeah, and it's fair to say that you probably never end up in a position where you'll never screw it up because, even with all the practice that I've had from tracking nutrition and understanding nutrition and all of these things, I still have weeks where I'm tracking, where I realize, I've overdone it on certain days with calories. I've gone out and I've not quite calculated in my mind what's going on correctly. And, you're never going to get to a point where you're a perfect dietary robot. You know what I mean? It's always going to be the battle between you and your primitive urges, your emotional connections with certain foods, and all of that stuff that was letting you down in the first place, but that you can just manage better than you were before. I think that's a really important thing to get across to people, so they can manage their expectations of what that kind of end goal looks like in the long run.
Agreed. Yeah, agreed.
Yeah. So one point that I would quite like to cover before we wrap up would be that not everybody is necessarily combining their dietary practices with exercise. You know, some people out there will just be trying to indiscriminately lose weight, aren't interested in exercise. I hope that most people are. I would recommend that everybody should be, but some people won't. But I would think that most people here are also using movement, using exercise to assist them with that at the very least, and that some people will obviously be involved to a much more enthusiastic level with sports, or with simply trying to improve their athletic performance. So what are the key things that you would say to those people who are not just trying to diet down and lose weight indiscriminately, but they're also focusing on athletic performance, to sort of watch out for when they start managing their diet better? What kind of things should be a bit more of a priority for them specifically than just the kind of typical fat loss advocate?
Obviously, quite a broad question.
Yeah. Sorry, yeah, it's not very specific, but
yeah, it depends on the level, the frequency, the intensities. Energy availability is a key aspect, making sure that when we take that energy expenditure away from exercise, or the energy expended during exercise, what we left with, do we have enough to run the body's normal daily functions? If not, then we will see negative things occur in terms of menstrual cycle disruption in females. We will see immune function compromised. We'll see lower testosterone production in males. So it's really important that if you are going to deficit or go into a deficit and you are training to a high intensity and your performance is a key area, that you do it carefully and you calculate and you do it properly, because there are some negative effects. But ultimately, if you're just somebody who goes to the gym 3-4 times a week and you enjoy your training, keep doing something that you enjoy, keep that energy expenditure element as high as you can. And yeah, it's quite a broad question to answer, but it's okay. That's the major thing I would be looking out for someone who trains extensively, if going into a deficit, is making sure that you are fueling that training adequately, but you're also fueling your body to recover effectively as well.
Yeah, I'm sorry if it was a bit vague, but I think that sums up perfectly kind of what I was sort of steering it towards, really, which was just kind of the average, well, not the average, but the typical person who's going to the gym, who's quite keen to improve athletic performance, and probably in terms of guys, you know, most guys especially are looking to improve their strength, looking to at least preserve the muscle mass that they've already got, as well as ideally build some if they can, if the deficit's, you know, not necessarily too low. And so just kind of what they could look out for. But you summed it up perfectly in my view, which is just making sure that you've got the necessary energy allowance to still get through your training and still get something out of your training, and then obviously recover from it as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
All right, awesome, good stuff. Well, there's nothing in the comments that hasn't been covered already. So is there anything that you want to finish on, Lorne? Have you got any messages that you want to get out to people regards this topic?
No, just that this lockdown will end. Life will return to normal, and the decisions that we make during it will determine the type of person you are that comes out the other side. If you are happy and comfortable coming out a few kilograms heavier, and you know, shirts and shorts and stuff feeling quite tight and a bit uncomfortable, but you're cool with that, there's nothing wrong with that. If you don't want to be that person and that doesn't sit well with you as an individual, there are steps you can take to reduce the effects and make sure you come out in the best shape possible. So comes down to, you know, you as an individual, what do you want to get out of it? But don't see this lockdown as something that can't be worked around, because it absolutely can. Yeah, absolutely. Well, there's loads of tips in there for how people can manage it better, so hopefully they've taken something useful away, and I've got nothing more to add. So pleasure to have you on. Thanks for coming in, and we'll catch the rest of the guys in the community sometime soon. Cool, thanks for having me, mate. Appreciate it. All right, catch you soon, Dawn. Bye. Bye-bye.